Well, welcome back to Along the Road. We are here in the deep snow of Kingston, New Hampshire. I'm Pastor Josh.
And I'm Katie, the Children's Discipleship Director.
I was talking the other day with my daughter, and we've been in New Hampshire about a little over 6 years. I said, this is the most snow in a season we've seen. I think in the last month, we're at 3 feet total, maybe a little more. And, I mean, it's not that bad out there, but it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of snow, and it just keeps coming.
Yes, and apparently this is the coldest winter in 25 years.
Hey, there you go. So, which, cold is better. If you're not from around here, cold is better for snow. The colder the better, the lighter the snow.
Yes.
So it can literally just fluff away.
Powdery.
I do like that. So, and if you are from around here, hopefully you've gotten out skiing as well. And done some things.
Made a snowman.
Made a snowman, but I digress. We're here to talk about our faith, talk about bringing it along the road, and we started along with our church reading through the themes of Scripture, starting in Genesis and walking through using the program called E100, or the Essential 100 Scriptures that they choose out of the Bible. And last week we did the first 15 of them.
Yes.
Which, took us through creation and the choosing of Abraham and up to the end of the story of Joseph, or as I like to say, Jacob being placed in Goshen, And so now there's this entrance into Exodus. And so, from day 16 through day 22, there's a lot about Exodus and what happened in the birth of Moses. But I remind people often, and this part, it doesn't quite, always catch it. From the end of Genesis, Jacob is there, Joseph, his whole family, they're given this land called Goshen. This is for you to be safe. However many were in their tribe, not a tremendously large amount, with the brothers.
70-ish.
Probably somewhere around there, a little more, a little less, depending how many workers they had with them. But it's, you turn the page, literally you turn the page, and it's 400 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's 400 years where God is not recorded in there, and 400 years of learning and growing and becoming. I think a lot of those of Israel became a lot like the Egyptians around them, and there's hints to that cultural assimilation, and there's hints to that later on. It's actually hints to that when Joshua speaks to them.
Yeah.
That to put away the gods that you worshipped when you were in Egypt. So they really came into that. But we see this drastic time. And we just see it as part of God's picture. And I always remind people, if that is true, there are those people who see the Old Testament and the New Testament as very separate. Mm-hmm. But there's a 400-year mark of silence there. It's the same mark of time, and it's still a continuance of God's picture. So just as a reminder, as I was thinking of that when we were coming to this, I had somebody in a previous ministry come up to me and ask me why I would preach or teach from the Old Testament, and gave them and talked about some of these things. And this is God's full story. And they grew up being told it wasn't necessary anymore. Mm-hmm. And about a year later, they said, this is really great. This is really good stuff. Why did they tell us that? I said, I'm not sure. But as an encouragement, this is why you start in the Old Testament. This is where God's story begins. It's important to know all of this story. And it's important for us to understand that. So that when you do get to the gospel, or you do get to, the stories in the Gospels and the church, I think it makes a much bigger difference. Yeah. And so
it's the context.
It's the context. It's the development of who God is and how you know who He is and how He calls a people. And so far He's called a people, but I remind people often as we're actually preaching right here in this area, what we know of as most of the Old Testament is the Israelites. What Jesus talks about to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It's all about the covenant with Israel, which hasn't happened yet. They've been called, but they don't have a contract with God yet.
Well, Abraham had.
He has one, but that's a contract that has no condition.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, God says, "I will bless you." This is my job to do. He doesn't let Abraham go through that. The only thing Abraham does is say, "Okay, I accept." So the second one is the covenant of circumcision to say, "I will accept this," or "I trust you." But the contract of there's a condition that I need from you, and it goes back and forth. Mm-hmm. That's what we are constantly thinking about. But and Paul writes about this a lot. This hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So the judgment of God that comes upon sin is before the law. Before. So when we read all of these things, they're all happening before the law, and God is kind of operating the way God always has. It's no different, and so you can begin to see that. But I think it's helpful to remember that. We tend to forget it.
Yeah.
Well, they had the law, or the law said this. It wasn't even there yet. Moses hadn't even gone to a mountain to collect it yet, as the famous 10 Commandments plus the rest. So we look at the beginning of the story of Exodus. It's the birth of Moses. As the themes go through, it kind of opens up, and they're enslaved. 400 years.
Because they grew significantly in those 400 years.
Absolutely. They grew so large that they began to worry the Egyptians. But they were also enslaved by the Egyptians. How that happens, I don't know. How it happens that a group of people are honored because, therefore, their ancestor, Joseph, literally rescued not just Egypt, but all the known world with the interpretation of God's dream and allocating the harvest and things appropriately to becoming slaves.
Mm.
And how that happens, I'm not sure, but that's exactly what happens, and you shouldn't be surprised, because that's what God says will happen in Genesis 15 when he's talking about what will happen and how he continues his promise. But he says your people will have this land, but first they must go, and then they says they'll be enslaved, and it says it'll be 400 years. And so we enter this time where you're like, 400 years, and now we start hearing this story, and you should go, oh, this is exactly what God said. So now motion should happen, and these Israelites are enslaved. The Pharaoh, as we've learned in history, that pharaohs were not always by dynasty, so it wasn't just always passed down. They like that, it would be better. But as with most places, somebody wanted to be pharaoh, and if you get enough people on your side,
if you're stronger,
you can kill the pharaoh and all his family, and you become pharaoh. And that happened during this time, and some people think that right around this time there were some pharaohs that did that were foreigners at first. So you see all these foreigners, and they're very large, and you're a pharaoh, and you're a foreigner, and you become pharaoh. You can see how the fear of that, that's going to happen to me, so I'm going to do something about this happens. And so you see that, and the birth of Moses is quite a interesting process of people deciding whether they're going to trust in who God is and what he's doing. Of course, it's a miracle that he survives. I think I don't know if God has a sense of humor or what, I think it's God has a sense of humor, where literally Moses is discovered by Pharaoh's daughter. And she's like, I will adopt this baby.
Oh, isn't he cute?
Isn't he cute? We're killing all of these male children, but I'll take this one. And, of course, his sister pops out. She says, why don't you find me a nursemaid to take care of him until he's of age to come and live with the daughters, to come and live with me. And, okay, I'll go find mom. It's just this, and you almost find this sense of humor to me. Like, God, they're all thinking they're just kind of selfishly doing their own thing. And here God is saying, I'm orchestrating something you don't understand. And so that's what the birth happens within that. And people that, that are named and prominent, which are interesting, that these midwives within this story are named and they're prominent and they're told they're given blessing. I always find that interesting.
And part of the blessing was to have a family of their own, which
it must not have been too common.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they had that, and you'll see through all of this from here until they're out of Egypt. Pharaoh never has a name. He's just Pharaoh or King of Egypt, and that's very important because several things happen here, both in day 16 and day 17, birth of Moses and the burning bush. Pharaoh never has a name. These midwives are named. If you have a name, you're considered important. And then remember when the burning bush happens and Moses starts his little, he says, okay, who are you? What's your name that I would come? And God gives his proper name, and which hadn't been done through all of the book of Genesis until this point, where God says, this is my name. And so God has a name, The midwives have a name. Moses has a name. His brother has a name, but Pharaoh doesn't. Pharaoh is the one that thinks he's the most powerful, thinks he has all, and all the deity of their God. He is supposed to be that on earth, but he has no name, which to me is another one of those ways in which the scripture kind of reminds us what's most important. Yeah. And we try, I think people, when I did that sermon, several people were asking, well, which Pharaoh was it? I don't know. We have guesses around this range. Yep. And so could it be this or could it? Sure. And some people came and told me they knew which one it was. I said, well, probably not. But, there's a reason he has no name. Yeah. And so it's fun to think about it, but if you really are trying to chase that down, then you're chasing down a name that's not important to God's story.
You are using energy in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. Instead of saying, well, let me discover about the one that is most important. And so you see the story of the burning bush and Moses walking up and walking on holy ground and taking his shoes off, but God is calling him. And in this calling, he has to get to this place. But remember, it's now, he's like almost 80 at this point. He has tried it his own way.
And he doesn't want the job.
He doesn't want the job. And they don't show all of that. This reading doesn't show that, but the story where Moses grows up in Pharaoh's house, is trained with all the Egyptians. But also, remember, as a child, he was taught by his mother. Would have known about the calling of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, known which tribe he was from the tribe of Levi. He would have known all of these things. And so he sees one of his own Israelites being beaten. He gets angry. It's like, I can do something about this. And looks left and right. And he kills the Egyptian, buries the Egyptian. Of course, the next day he sees two Israelites fighting, and they say, what, are you going to kill us too? And he realizes, well, nothing's hidden before God. But he didn't do something right, and they would be after him. And so he ran off. And in the running off, he ends up graciously coming to this place where he rescues these girls that are bringing their animals to the watering hole and were kicked out by bullies, basically. And he helped them out. And then Jethro is the dad over there and says, hey, why don't you marry one of my daughters? But then the scene comes. He's way out somewhere, taking his flock somewhere on the other side of the mountain, doing what he's been doing for 40 plus years. That's a long time of just, I've escaped. I have a family. I'm in a good place. Like I can just imagine, like, my past is my past, and I'm out here roaming around, and I don't know what in the world that was in my life, that early stage.
Right.
And God appears.
Yeah, it must have been so different because in Egypt he would have been using his mind a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now he's just a simple shepherd out in the wilderness.
Yeah, it's a totally different type of using. He's being intuitive with what's happening. He's protecting them. Yep. But he's not being trained in the Pharaoh's household and trained in these things. And your living quarters are different. How you live is different. What you have is different. And so I think that part was very difficult. But also, what in the world was all of that? Mm-hmm. I obviously was born an Israelite. I'm sure he was told a story of being in the basket. Sure, he was told all these things. So God has to, this great God must have something for me. And I thought he did, and it all fell apart. Right. And you know what? I think I'll just be okay over here. They're not looking for me over here.
I got a new
family. I have a wife. I have kids.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to move on. And so just going through life, I think he wasn't expecting to find God, or God to find him, I should say. And so that interaction, I think, is always interesting, which is also why he gives every excuse that he can. And I remember we went over those, in the sermon, that he loved to give excuses or different reasons, legitimate or not. But it really comes back to God's first whole thing is like, well, what are you worried about? I am with you. I am the one that will do this.
He doesn't have a sense of that yet, though, does he?
No, I don't think he does. And I think that's why I've been loving preaching this, because Noah, or a lot of these people, not Noah, Moses, a lot of these people are like Moses, but a lot of us are like that too. We don't have a sense, and I think many of us don't really have a sense of God's presence with us every day. Mm-hmm. Which, just like Moses, actually in some ways more than Moses, Jesus says, I will be with you. I will send my helper to indwell you, so that I am with you. Don't worry about the words you're going to say. Just obey me, and I'm right there. That is just as much ours as it is Moses. Yeah. And how many of us think, I'm a Moses?
Yeah.
Moses didn't
can't do that.
Moses didn't even think he could do that. And so in one sense, we are Moses because we all have our excuses. We all don't have that sense of God is right here. He's in this place. And we have to learn to trust God. And in that, he even provides. God gets angry, shows his anger, gets frustrated at him. And even in the frustration, he's like, by the way, I already have your brother coming. Yeah. God's already providing what he needs. And then his brother basically will do anything Moses says because God said, I will speak to Moses, Moses will speak to you, and that's how it'll go. So when you read in the next section of the plagues, sometimes Moses does this, sometimes Aaron does it. Yep. It would have been as if either one. Mm-hmm. As if God just spoke to Moses and did that. And so that's what the plagues are about. This contrast between who is your God. Moses and Aaron have God and the one and only is their God. Everybody else has to discover who is God and decide all the idols or all the gods that they trust, are they worthwhile? And God then goes through all of these plagues, signs and wonders to destroy them. Mm-hmm. We did mention, we've talked about the hardening of Pharaoh's heart because people read about that. And I was just reading a lot about the biblical Hebrew thought in using that. It would have been almost interchangeable, that Pharaoh hardens his heart or God hardened Pharaoh's heart because they would have seen this not with this emotional sense. It's just he was already stubborn and there's this action that's happening. And so if someone's already stubborn, sometimes you're like, you're hard-hearted, right? Or someone's already stubborn and you do something because whatever you did, and they get even more. So maybe they're going to say it's your fault. But either way, it's the same thing. They were already hard and they're just going to stand their ground or dig their heels in. I'm not doing this.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you known a child who you knew was strong-willed?
Yeah.
And you said, nope, you can't do that. And they say,
I do it anyway.
Oh, yes, I can.
Already, and it's already there. And that points to the other part I found in the plagues is that it isn't just Pharaoh. Because we always talk about Moses against Pharaoh or God against Pharaoh. But when you read some of those details, you begin to see, well, it was Pharaoh and all of his people were opposed. And then...
Yeah, because when the Nile turns to blood, nobody's drinking.
Nobody's drinking, and everybody's dealing with this. But they're also just as stubborn. Even the magicians who eventually can't do anything after a couple of those, and they go, oh, this is the finger of God, but they don't say we should obey this God.
Yeah,
he is the one.
Additional
and then later on, around the 7th or 8th plague, you'll get a couple lines here and there where it says Moses and his servants. Moses and all of it, like, in other words, not Moses, Pharaoh and all of his servants, they were hard in heart. They didn't believe. God says, through Moses, God says, I've done all of this, and yet you still don't believe. Over and over again, that line keeps coming back. The plague of hail is the one that I always find interesting because hail's going to come down and it will destroy your livestock and all these.
In your fields.
And you know what? It's going to come down tomorrow at noon.
Right.
So if you believe, just like anything else, if you believe, then you take the action to that. And it said that those who feared God or believed of the Egyptians went out and brought their livestock in. And those who didn't left them out there, which is a very clear indicator that it's not just Pharaoh who has this hardened heart, like, I can take care of myself. That literal prideful sinfulness that we have.
Familiar human condition.
It is. It's very much that way. And then you see that after about the 3rd or 4th plague, God separates Israel. Like, they do not deal with the plagues. They're in their land of Goshen. They don't get the flies. They don't get the hail. They don't get these things. So all of this over here, they don't get. And the warning is always that you think they're so special over here. Well, The next one in day 19, it's actually our sermon coming up, is about the Passover. There was the warning of the final plague, the death of the firstborn. But when we get to the Passover, what's very interesting is the warning of death coming to the firstborn in the Passover was not just on Egypt. It was explicitly down to the Israelites.
Yeah.
This will happen to you too. In other words, the judgment of sin is just as much upon you as it is everybody else. And that's I think that's a crux of both of these passages, or this period here, that, as we said last week in our sermon, all have sinned. Now, does God call Israel, and I think they have a special purpose? Yes, but that doesn't make them less sinful.
Right.
Less worthy of his judgment. We are all worthy of his judgment. And so the Passover kind of reminds us of that. And he doesn't separate Israel.
Because he had been there for a while. And you could see how it would be easy to get cocky.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see what God's going
to do here. Yeah, exactly. And we can see, there's charts. You can literally Google and find a whole bunch of charts that for each plague, the Egyptian gods that are being destroyed in this. And remember, 400 years, the Israelites, many of them worship those gods too.
Sure.
So even though they're not dealing with the hail, not dealing with the darkness, they are seeing that God, it has power over all of the gods that they've set up. So they are just as much as responsible, as culpable for what they have believed and turned away from. So the final judgment is the biggest one, death.
Yeah.
And you think about it, that's, to me, goes back to the garden. Death was the judgment, and God provides a way for them. Death is the judgment here, and God provides a way. But when he provides a way, you have to choose. Are you gonna trust this or not trust this?
Are you gonna walk that path or not?
Right, and so is this blood of the lamb over the door and like all of these things? You have to decide if you're going to trust God and walk with him in that. And so this Passover time is that reminder that this is for everybody. Now, then it becomes something that just the Israelites think it's just theirs.
Yeah.
And we, they kind of feel this. You can almost feel like we're a little more special because we have this, as opposed to this is a reminder that all are sinful, which is a different way, I think, to look at Passover. Often, I think people that have been in church a long time or been religious a lot of their lives can have that feeling.
Sure.
Oh, yeah,
I got it.
I've been a Christian for all my life. Well, you're still just as deserving, and our sin needs to hang over us. We should still be angry at what death is. Because death, both our physical death and our spiritual death before God, is a result of our brokenness, of our sin. And we should be angry at that. I'm not afraid of death. There's a difference.
Yes.
I look forward because, like the Passover, Christ is his blood is what not just covers me but cleanses me, so I can be with him. So I'm not afraid of death, but I can, and I think in this earth we should be angry at death. Even Christians. To one another. It takes
away loved ones.
It takes away loved ones, and it reminds us of the devastating power of our own sinfulness. And so the Passover kind of puts the weight of that on there and says, are you going to trust this or not? I love, as I read in chapter 11 at the end of the sermon last week, that right before he gives them the warning, he says, so go to your neighbors and ask them for gold and silver. The men ask the men, the women ask the women. And I try and picture that. You're literally going to your neighbors, asking them for their expensive things. And it says they all had favor and gave it to them. Like, literally, they plundered Egypt by just saying, hey, can we have your nice things?
Right. Now, of course, the Egyptians understand that the God of the Israelites is the source of all of their recent misfortunes. And to a certain extent, I'm sure in their heads it was, if that will get you out of here and take your God with you,
I'll be better
that's
off.
A good exchange.
Yeah. Maybe we can pay him to get out of here. Maybe we can do this. Yeah.
Right.
And so they have the Passover that happens, and you'll find some writings in there that actually say it wasn't just Israelites that participated.
Whoever comes into your house, yes.
Yeah, and it's literally the same as Genesis 17 with the covenant of circumcision. Any of those foreign born under Abraham, which would have been almost all of them,
right?
Any of those foreign born who choose this covenant, they are grafted in. They become part of that. So anyone who's like, your God is my God, and they come in and they cover with the blood, they become Israelites, which is a powerful notion to remember that God is always out to rescue all of creation.
Yes.
All peoples, all ethnicities. That's
God so loved the world.
The whole world. It's a complete passage, encompassing thing. And then the last parts there, they go and cross the Red Sea, and there's these challenges each way, and these are large national challenges that I think are similar to how God is dealing with Moses. Like, you're going to confront this, and Moses cries, "Why did you bring me here?" And they're not listening. Well, they brought him to the sea, and they're like, "Why did you?" And yet, as a group, they need to begin to see more and more who God is. And I think just like the apostles later walking with Jesus, some of them just went along and weren't quite there yet. Some may never have believed, really to that point. So I think the crossing of the Red Sea is a powerful notion, because God really shows that he's God of all creation.
Yeah, I mean, you read it, the water, they walked over on dry ground, and then you really stop and think about what's involved with that.
Yeah, I mean, so you could go down to the little pond here and maybe dam up some water and move some stuff, and we have engineering to do that, but how's that ground going to get dry?
Overnight.
The fact that it's dry and they can move, there's all these parts to it that are interesting. And then when they gather to worship on that very same mountain, when God says, "On this mountain you will be back, your people will be back," he says to Moses, "You will come here." That's where the burning bush was. That's what we see. That's where he gives the commandments. We call them the 10 Commandments because those are the ones on the tablets, but the entire law is much larger than that.
Yeah.
And in that scene, there's that scene of God having a covenant with the people. This is what I'm asking of you. And if you do this, you will have the land and the blessing and the prosperity and all of these things. My presence will be with you everywhere. This is, all you got to do is follow this.
It sounds so simple.
It's a contract. And it's not just 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments do kind of, they're generic enough that they really encompass a lot of things.
Right.
But it's like a little over 600 laws. And if you can do this, and we find out even in the gospel, it wasn't like you had to do every letter. If you could really take the heart of this law, which was actually deeper than just the doing the things, that's what God was asking. Then I do. But if you don't, then come the curses. And that's where that begins. There is a contract there of, if you don't do this, then I will end up scattering you. I'll spread you around, and you'll find that, hundreds of years later, 1,000 years later, after little Israel becomes a kingdom, has kings, has a temple and a palace, and then gets destroyed over time after it divides because they weren't in this covenant and were warned over and over and over again. So that's where that begins in how God works with his people and is showing them you can never fulfill the law, right? And of course, the interesting scene is down below the mountain. As literally, it always gets me, as the cloud kind of hangs on the mountain, like God's presence up there with Moses, Aaron is down there and the people start begging to do something,
Not something we can see.
There's always this tangible, like, I want a God like everyone else has, which I still struggle with. I mean, I think we all do that, but I struggle with that in that moment because you're not that far removed from the plagues of all your little gods. Some of them had their little Egyptian gods, and God destroys all of their power. Yeah. You're not that far removed from literally walking across the sea. You are. It's fresh in your minds, and you go, we need to do this. And so they raise up the golden calves. They had a lot of gold.
They did.
Made their golden calves. And what's crazy is as they do this, they don't just say, this will represent our God. This will,
Right.
like, okay, we don't know what he looks like. We made him look like this. They said, this is your God that drew you out of Egypt. It is amazing. And I think how often we do little things like that and not recognize that God is the one doing this work. And it's that scene, we bend to need something to worship. And tangible, we like that better. We always like to feel it better or to see it better. So that's how...
It's more, you know what? It's more comfortable.
It is more comfortable. But that's how, I think that's how traditions become idols. That's how a religion becomes an idol. We have to worship this way. We have to do it this way. I've had people say in a church setting, oh, well, we don't sing this at the end anymore, or they do this out of order at this church. Does that matter?
Right.
To them, it really does, because the thing that's tangible to them to hold on to and to bring them comfort has become more important than the one who has rescued them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the picture happens here. Mm-hmm. And so you have some interesting things that happen between there and what will happen in the next set of things. So that's the end of this version's calling of the people. The law goes out. There's a sickness that goes over people that is literally killing people. I think I can't wait. We kind of wait, but I can't wait to preach the scene,
With the bronze snake?
With the bronze snake. It's a strange thing. Like, how does that work? And really, in one sense, you're like, it's so simple. You want to live? Pick up your eyes and look at the snake. Has nothing to do with what the item is.
Right.
It's literally... It's just like God called out. For anyone who chooses for eternal life, surrender to Christ. It's that, and someone's like, it's got to be harder than that. It's got to be something more than that. And what's beautiful is that gospel is inherent through all of the Old Testament. You can kind of see these pictures right here. Mm-hmm. The gospel of all of sin and fall short of the glory of God. That the wages of sin is death, all right within here in Exodus. And then finally, that grace comes through the Lamb, which is Christ.
Yeah.
And rescues us all. And it's a gift. Yes. So
I like to think about Joshua.
Yeah.
Who was eyewitness to all of this, because he actually went up a mountain with Moses.
He did. So how God works, he's not culpable for what happens down there.
Right.
He will be the next leader. But remember, he's not the called king. He's just leading the people that God has. So I think it's very interesting. I love the readings we're having, the questions people are doing. And I would just encourage you, if you have other questions, to put them on there. And if you haven't jumped on the app, or maybe you're just reading on paper, let us know. We'd love to hear what you're saying and what you're thinking. By the time this comes out, you'll probably be close to day 22, right around there. And we'll hit the next 7 days next week and see how that goes. But I'm enjoying this. The themes they pick out, the semi-shorter passages kind of give us these pictures of the story, and then we can fill them in if we want. But I would challenge you to kind of begin to see the gospel of the good news of God as Savior is found in all of these places. Mm-hmm. Often we think of gospel and we only think of New Testament. The gospel is right here as well. And so I would challenge that we would look at that and go, oh, where's the gospel in here? How's God gracious? How's God in a gift giving him this? How's God providing the rescue? And how's God a God of judgment and wrath? And
how is it pointing to Christ?
How is it pointing to Christ? So the plagues were a big one in our last sermon about that. God is a God of judgment, and everyone will know him that way. Mm-hmm. But if you surrender to Christ, you can know him as Savior. So you kind of have that. That's what it's pitted against. And it'll get a little more poignant when we do the Passover, because these special people are only called, but the God of that wrath is still on their boat. And I think you begin to see that as we walk through all of this. Imperfect, chosen people
God is so patient with us.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and when I say that, maybe you're thinking the Israelites, or maybe you're just thinking your own church or your own people. We're all imperfect, chosen people, and God calls us. So, yeah, I would say between now and next week, take some time and think about that and look for the gospel message in the Old Testament story, because it is there.
It is.
And we have the benefit of knowing what happened thousands of years later. We have the
Yes.
benefit of having the Gospels and the early church, so we can even see. Remember, Jesus said he opened the laws and the prophets and told them where everything talked about him. So
Yeah.
it's here,
Mhm.
and that's an encouragement. So I would take some time and do that. And this week, I hope you spend some time in His Word and you're encouraged with His gospel news. So until then, have a great week.
Take care.